Hello beautiful people, it's Mai here from Nintendo Life, and today we're reviewing Monster Crown Sin Eater on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by the lovely Mitch Vogel and made into a video by yours truly. Now without further ado, let's get stuck in. In 2021, a monster-catching RPG called Monster Crown hit the eShop, a one-man project aiming to emulate the glory days of Pokémon. Though it had its shortcomings, it mostly captured the essence of its inspiration, and evidently it garnered enough of a following to justify the launch of a sequel after a successful Kickstarter campaign. Though the reins have now been passed to a new development team within Studio Aurum, Jason Walsh, the original creator, is still heavily involved. Monster Crown Sin Eater is a worthy continuation, and we'd suggest you pay attention to this one if you're looking for a new monster catcher. Eschewing the player-created character of its predecessor, the narrative here places you in the role of Aesir, a humble farmer boy and aspiring monster tamer whose older brother Dias is renowned across Crown Nation for his skill as a master tamer. Dias also has a bit of a rebellious streak, and his shenanigans put him at odds with the nefarious ruler Lord Taishakutan, who sends one of his fixers to kidnap Dias and makes an example of him. Aesir then sets out in pursuit of his lost brother, kicking off a journey of self-discovery and empowerment that will ultimately change the fate of the whole Crown Nation. It's an interesting plot setup that goes a bit beyond the whole I want to be the very best plot that a certain other monster catching series loves to adhere to. And we were shocked at how surprisingly dark it can get in certain places. The Holy Order certainly doesn't mess around with its cruel governmental tactics, and the world of Crown Nation feels hostile and uncaring in ways that reminded us of our experience with some Shinigami Tensei games. Couple this with the role-playing and branching narrative that works with the dialogue trees of NPCs, and you have a rich narrative with mature themes that can develop in some genuinely unexpected directions. Gameplay follows the expected format of the monster catching RPG, but with some nice quality of life features to smooth the experience. For one thing, there are no random encounters. Monsters roam the map and will uniquely react to your presence depending on the disposition of the creature. So predators will generally chase or stalk you, whilst the friendlier herbivores will either be unmoved by your presence or flee if you get too close. Not only does this mean that combat encounters are something you have more control over engaging with, but it also interacts well with the bait system, in which you can put out bait to either distract creatures to sneak around them or to coax out a rather shy specimen you're trying to nab. When you enter an encounter, things play out with the familiar rock paper scissors turn-based combat system. Each monster has resistances and weaknesses to each of the 5 move types, and every creature has a set list of moves that it can make, each of which pulls from a pool of move points that limit how often they can be used. If one of your creatures goes down, or you have another in reserve that's a better match for your current foe, you can snap in one of your other monsters to gain the upper hand. So far, so similar, but things get a little more interesting with the inclusion of the synergy bar. Every time your monster acts, it'll fill up a varying number of percentage points in a global synergy bar that all monsters can tap into. Once you've got a fair amount built up, you can then burn some of the bar to crown one of your moves, bolstering its effectiveness and sometimes adding some cool new passives that make it more potent. We really enjoyed the risk-reward aspect. It's a lot easier to burn synergy than it is to build it up, and there's a brilliant tension to determining when to crown a move and when to hold some in reserve to deal with whatever gets thrown at you later in a drawn-out fight. And of course, if you're battling a wild monster, you can then decide to catch it by tossing a contract at it. If you do so right from the jump, most monsters won't even bother to read it because you haven't gained their respect yet. So you'll have to beat them within an inch of their life and perhaps inflict a status ailment or two, raising the odds of them accepting the terms and joining your team. Like in all great monster catchers, there's a delightful tension in that moment when you toss a contract at a desirable creature and you hold your breath as you wait for it to ponder its decision, not knowing if it'll acquiesce and end the fight there or respond with a vicious attack. Drawing a bit from some notable non-Nintendo monster catchers, there's also a robust monster breeding and fusion system that proves to be impressively addictive. Not only can you get some brand new creatures as the offspring offspring of two distinct species, but you can really get into the weeds of editing the genes of your monsters to get just the right combination of stats, traits, and moves on the ultimate monster for a given role in your party. Much like in something like Dragon Quest Monsters or Shinigami Tensei, it's the sort of system that really starts to open up once you build a good collection of fodder, and it can be a great puzzle to plan out several generations of creatures as you slowly close in on the specific one you're looking for. If you're the kind of player who likes to tinker with party compositions and loadouts, you'll really appreciate that there's a lot to dive into here, yet it never feels overwhelming or needlessly abstract. We were also impressed by the openness of the overall gameplay flow, taking the training wheels off after a relatively linear beginning and opening things up somewhat like the more recent Zelda games. Though you can't beeline straight to the final boss, almost the whole map is open to you after this point, and you're encouraged to make your way through it as you identify which bosses you'd like to take down next and what regions you'd like to prioritize exploring. Along the way, there are all sorts of points of interest, new monsters and rival tamers to challenge Ace's resolve as he continues his quests and grows his power. That said, a notable downside of this open-ended structure is that it can sometimes feel a bit directionless. The more recent Pokemon games have taken some flack for being overly handholdy, but it feels like Sin Eater overcorrects a bit too far in not giving you enough guidance for what to do next. There were some points where we found ourselves floundering a bit, wondering where to go next. This is more of a personal nitpick, and some players may prefer experiences more akin to the sometimes opaque RPGs of days past. Visually, this adventure executes a brilliantly old-school 8-bit art style that faithfully calls back to the Game Boy Color Pokemon games, or even something more recent like the fan-made Pokemon Lazarus. The simple sprites are accented by some cleverly placed white lines that nicely contrast with the other colors, while things step up notably for the battle screens. Here, the pixel style gets notably more detailed with more advanced sprite work, with move animations offering some show-stopping effects that really sell the monster's fantastic weighty attacks. This is all matched by an eccentric chiptune soundtrack that pulls from a variety of inspirations, perfectly enhancing the atmosphere with a variety of different moods and tempos. The energetic and whimsical main battle theme sounds like something Jake Kaufman would come up with for yet another Shovel Knight expansion, while some of the village and town themes sound like they're from a lost PS1 era JRPG. Suffice it to say, it's a nice, well-rounded soundtrack, and it pairs well with the on-screen theatrics. Much like the breeding and fusion system at the heart of its team building, Monster Crown's Sin Eater is a satisfyingly iterative improvement over its predecessor, refining the systems and strengths it introduced while tossing the things that held it back from being great. Deep party customization, a surprisingly in-depth story, beautiful GBC-esque visuals, and a killer soundtrack all combined to make this one worth a punt. Even if some growing pains with the open-ended design can sometimes drag it down a bit. We'd give this one a recommendation if you're looking for something to ease your pain after the Pokemon Champions launch. Sin Eater was made with lots of love and hopefully will form the basis of some adventures in this fascinating world. We here at Nintendo Life give Monster Crown Sin Eater an 8 out of 10. So now I suppose it's time for my thoughts. This is either going to be a very short and sweet section of my thoughts, or it's going to be a long-winded rant. When I initially saw the game, I thought, oh god, this looks great. This is like right up my alley, OG Pokemon style graphics, the same sort of mechanics and everything, but except, hey, look, it's fusion, it's breeding. This sounds really cool. Unfortunately, I became very quickly underwhelmed by the game. Don't get me wrong, it's got some really great bones, proper good meat. But I think it's because I'm so used to the older Pokemon games to not be handholdy, really, to be honest, but kind of still give you some direction of where you're going. I felt like with this, I was kind of walking around and not really sure what to do. I got lost quite a lot as well, probably because of how open it was, and that's even before trying to get to the main city to find my brother. I did, however, really enjoyed the fact that the catching mechanics was a pact rather than putting all your bets in a Pokeball. Saying that, I feel like there wasn't really that much explanation with them. You can expect them, you can see what the little stat bits is, but I feel like this is a little bit more like the OG Pokemon games on steroids, really. It's for people who are less interested in having a cute little fun story, catching cute mons or monsters in this case, and more into the kind of stats side, which I'm not really a big person with that. Saying that, I do understand the whole type system when it comes to Pokemon. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward, and also type systems in other games. Like I have played quite a fair bit of Persona and other kind of monster catching games. But with this, I felt very lost. I felt like there wasn't really much in the way of explaining the different types. I had to go and look at the original game in order to understand the type resistance and weaknesses. And even then, I felt like it didn't really make any sense. I've tried everything. I tried using a monster that would be would have an advantage against another monster type. I tried using whatever moves I could. It was only until I realized that, oh look, it's flashing red. I can use that as an advantage, as an effective move. Or in this case, in the case of Monster Crown Sin Eater, a good matchup. Yeah, I am quite disappointed with how much meandering I had to do. I spent most of my playthrough probably grinding up my monsters so they'd be an adequate level before I realized, oh, that's kind of pointless, because I could have a high level monster, but I'd be fighting a low level monster, and it'll either knock them out straight away or it won't do anything moves wise, because their moves are specific when it comes to effectiveness. I did enjoy, however, the breeding mechanic, the fusion. I thought that was really cool. I had a lot of fun with that, making the little eggs and trying to see what kind of weird little monstrosities were going to come out of these eggs. My favorite one was a very simple one, the first one I made, which was like a billy goat, which was cute. Yeah, I renamed him Billy because I'm very original like that. In sense of direction, I think that's definitely the big thing that frustrated me a lot, most of all. I don't want a game that's hand-holdy, but I do want a game that gives me a little bit more direction. You can go into the notebook and you can see side quests and main quests, but unless you're kind of actively checking the map or going around reading everything, which I do that, doesn't really give you much advice on what to do. And I have to admit, the crown mechanic is something that I didn't realize was even a proper thing in this until I read the review. I never saw how to actually use it. I saw the synergy bar going up, but there was no actual directions, or I couldn't find any sort of tutorial that told me how to actually use it. And now going back into it, I really like it. I just wish that it was more obvious. It was a bit refreshing seeing the monsters in the overworld rather than being random encounters popping about. And I did enjoy that the tamers weren't just gonna be coming at you, trying to fight you just because you're in your eye line. There are some that run around like speedy little road runners and just bump into you, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. But the ones that are literally just standing still give you the option to have a friendly match between tamers, which I thought was pretty cool. Overall though, I know it may seem a little bit vague, but I do wish that this had a little bit more direction. There's some really, really cool mechanics in it. Like I say, I really like the fact that it was a more mature story and a much more mature themes. Like there's a little bit of swearing in it, but that's something to expect with a more mature game, and some things that actually, let's just say, consequences to certain people's actions occurred, and I was a bit gobsmacked at what happened. But that's an early game thing. Yeah, it's fun. I would definitely say that for people who are looking for more of a Pokemon style game, or like the original Pokemon style games, and wanting like kind of a bit more of a cutesy sort of situation, or a little more enjoyable, less grindy, because that's what I had to do. I do a lot of grinding and I love grinding, but I don't think you should probably go for this one. If you are a little bit of a stat maniac, then I would definitely say go for this. And if you're wanting kind of like hardcore Pokemon vibes, yes. In all honesty, it's probably very unlikely I'll go back and play the game again, but you never know. I might change my mind if I want to have a more hardcore monster catching experience. Plus, that music is constantly in my head now, and I have loads of eggs to hatch. Either way, watch this space. Oh.